So we'll begin with prayers. Om Agyantimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gaurvani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Prabhuji, thank you so much for having me for this Gita for You session episode. And let me just tell you about this interaction I've had with Rasik Raman Prabhu since a year long. And Prabhuji has been one of the most kind people I have met. Prabhuji has been one of the most, I might say, the wisest people, one of the wisest people I have met in my life. And it's a pleasure to be part of this episode where we go to discuss one of the most crucial questions about Bhagavad Gita, asked about the Bhagavad Gita. And congratulations, Prabhuji. I have seen a few of your previous episodes with Jay Kishan. You and your counseli, you both guys, you like rocked those episodes. So I was like really fascinated with the kind of interaction you were giving for the people in general to, how you made the Gita an easy treatise to understand. So that's thank you so much and congratulations.
Thank you, Rishi. So to just briefly introduce Rishi, he is a very, very talented, creative personality. He has done courses on creative acting, and then also he has completed his degree in history, right? Bachelor's in history. Yeah. So thank you. So I think historic having you here.
Definitely, it is historic that you called me.
So yes,
okay.
How do you to set the ball rolling?
Yeah, definitely. I have, originally when I first came across the Bhagavad Gita and ISKCON, one of the big questions for me was, when I used to see people dancing in the streets. This has come from what my observation was when I used to see people dancing in the streets, going for Hare Krishna kirtans. When I have seen people, somewhere or the other, getting emotional at times, getting sentimental about God. So somewhere or the other, looking from outside, this thought process starts to kick in. That is this some kind of sentimentalism going on? Is this some kind of they're worshipping God? Is this something based? Because one essential, crucial thing that goes on outside is weak people, they worship God. Strong people, they can get things done.
Wow. Okay.
This is something.
So basically, then how did you adjust that? That you see. Basically, how do you adjust that? That you sometimes see expression of emotions and sentiments by religious people, devotional people, and you find that the people who are more academic, intellectual, they kind of stay away from this sentimental stuff. So it might seem that the intellectual people, the strong people, they might choose atheism, which is becoming quite common globally. Of course, not so much in India, but globally, this is a phenomena that people more and more are disillusioned with the existing forms of religious understanding. And it is assumed that sentimental people, weak people who need the crutches of religion, they believe in God. So yeah, well taken. The question is well taken. Now, if you look at this point that okay, academicians and intellectuals, they generally tend to be very objective, and they might not believe in God. This doesn't stand scrutiny to the scrutiny of actual facts, because you have great scientists and philosophers who have been believers in God. Starting from Newton, I'll read out a quote of Newton for you.
Sure.
I do not know what I may appear to the world, but to myself I seem to have been only like a boy playing on the seashore and diverting myself in now and then finding a smoother pebble or a prettier shell than ordinary, whilst the great ocean of truth lay all undiscovered before me. So Newton, while he was working on calculus, differentiation, integration, which is a nightmare for many of the science math students. So while he was working on discovering calculus, he coined it by the name calculus. You know why? Calculi, it's something, a history piece for you. Calculi is called a stone. So kidney stone nikalta to the calculi of 2 mm, right? So calculi means stones. So he says this discovery of integration, differentiation, calculus is just like a pebble which I discovered, one of the millions of pebbles which lie on the shore of the vast ocean of truth, which is undiscovered for me. So that's how Newton places it, that God's creation is vast and endless, and whatever discovery that we have made is just a small pebble. So with that attitude, Newton approaches science. So it's not that there are academicians and intellectuals have have to be non-believers, and there are so many more. You have Vikram Sarabhai. Once one gentleman was inducted into the BARC, Baba Atomic Research Center, way back in the 50s, and he was on the shore of the ocean, and he saw one gentleman reading the Bhagavad Gita, and he came across to him and he said, "Look, sir, India has been downtrodden and backward because of these very conservative and non-scientific belief systems like this Bhagavad Gita." And then the gentleman didn't say anything. He just kept looking at him and he said, "Okay, that's all right." And in the meanwhile, a car pulled up, 2 security guards came up, and the chauffeur ushered this gentleman who was reading the Gita into the car. And then this other gentleman was surprised. He said, "Sir, may I know who are you?" And this gentleman said, "Okay, I am Dr. Vikram Sarabhai,
Wow.
the founder of Indian Space Research Organization, the director of BARC." While this person from Calcutta was recently selected in the BARC as a junior scientist. So it is not true that okay, there are academicians and philosophers who are believers, and there are academicians and philosophers who are non-believers. So that's something about and now it's also said that many times we see that okay, many of these academicians, they tend to be atheists, but it is more about political how politically things are manipulated, right? If you get the chair of the department is an atheist, then the papers which are selected for publication, the students which are enrolled, the professors which are selected, and then the research papers which get a grant are those which carry on with the propaganda, right? So that's also a matter to be considered.
Okay.
However, Krishna has something interesting to on this topic of what determines someone to be an atheist or a theist. Is it that someone who is an intellectual becomes an atheist, and someone who is a sentimental person, he becomes a theist? Is it that someone who is pleasure seeking pleasure, they become an atheist, right? And someone who is seeking salvation, or someone who is seeking knowledge, they become theists. It's not like that. It's not black and white. Krishna, these beautiful verses of the Gita, Namam dushkritano mudha prapadyante naradhama maya aparata jnana asuri bhavam ashrita. So Krishna describes 4 type of people who are non-believers. I guess this is, yeah. So there are 4 types of people who are non-believers, and then Krishna talks about 4 types of people who are believers. Artho arthati jigyasu jnani cha bharatarshava. So now if you look at these 4 types of people on the atheist spectrum and the theist spectrum, there's something very interesting to be revealed. So let me write it down if it helps, the whiteboard. So is the whiteboard visible?
Not right now, Prabhuji.
Okay, now it should be running.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are these 4 types of people who are okay. So Krishna speaks of these 4 type of people who are non-believers. So he begins with Mudha, who are gross materialist. Now, gross materialist, especially these days, you have a movement called, have you heard of the YOLO? You only live once.
Yeah.
Huh? So there is this movement called the YOLO who have a philosophy based on Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud says that the only motivation in this world is sex enjoyment, pleasure, right? Rest all is superfluous. So there are these gross materialists who just want sensual pleasures, and then they are not comfortable with having a supreme God, because then they will have to follow the dictums and moral principles which may come in the way of their enjoyment. So therefore, they deny the existence of God for their own sensual pleasures, for protecting, safeguarding their sensual pleasure, that I may go into any degree of perversion in sensual pleasures. There should not be any moral dictums dictating my sensual pleasures. So this is the sensual atheists. Then the Naradhamas, another kind of the Mudhas are emotional atheists. They are the sensual atheists and they are the emotional atheists. Emotional atheists are those who at some point of time used to believe in God, but then something bad happened in their life. Kuch bura ho gaya, and then they felt that how can God do this to me? So in fact, there was a gentleman, Harold Kushner. So his daughter died prematurely, and he was disillusioned with the idea of God, that how could God do this to me? And he wrote a book, Why Do Bad Things Happen to Good People? Right? So these are the emotional atheists who at some point of time believed in God, but when their pleasures are denied or they go through pain in life, they give up the idea of God. So that is the first category. The next is the Naradhama. Krishna talks, who are intelligent people, kind of, but they they are creative people. They are into mundane scholarship, historians, poets, material scientists. So these are the kind of people who are, you can call them political atheists. So political atheists like Karl Marx. So Karl Marx and his philosophy is religion is the opium of the masses. Religion is so he's an historian. He saw the history of mankind, that how the oppressors oppress the oppressed. The higher class, the capitalists, they oppress the laborers. So based on that history, he created a philosophy. And then Nehruji created temples of technology, not believing in God, that these institutes of technology are our new temples. Then there are these Maya, Aphrita Jnana. These are the speculators. They are the academic or intellectual atheists. Academic or intellectual atheists like Darwin, who gave a very flowery philosophy that everything came about from matter. That there is no need of an entity called God to explain this creation. So that's how you have these kind of intellectual class. And then there's a philosopher called Nietzsche. He's spelled as Nietzsche. Nietzsche, a German philosopher. He says that actually, even if God created this world at some point of time, looking at the sufferings right now, it seems that God is dead. So God is dead. That is part of what he wrote. And then after he died, someone wrote, Nietzsche is dead, God. Right. So there are these philosophers who are speculators, who are intelligent, but they speculate, just try to eliminate God out of the picture. And then there are the Asura Bhava Ashrita. These are the Asuras, their purpose is to they attack God. For example, Hiranyakashipu, Ravana, Shishupal, they attacked Varahadev, Ramachandra, Krishna. So these are these Mayavadis who also try to attack God by saying that God doesn't have limbs, God doesn't have a form, or by saying that I am God myself. So there are these different classes of atheists who tend to have this atheism. So they have a cause because of which they ascertain that the cause of all causes is not God. The cause behind their denial of God is either their sensual pleasure, or their emotional disillusionment, or their political motives, or their intellectual titillation, or pure ego. So therefore, and even amongst these two, the first two, the Mudhas and the Naradhamas, they are looking for pursuit of pleasure. The next two are looking for pursuit of knowledge. Speculators and Mayavadis, the academic and intellectual philosophers, and they are in pursuit of knowledge. Now you have, Krishna says, 4 types of people who approach God. Let's see. How do they fare? So these 4 types of people, Artho are distressed. They are looking for relief from distress. Artharthi are those who are looking for money or power, prosperity. Jigyasu are the inquisitive types who are seeking knowledge. And Jnani are those who are realized sages who have got some spiritual realization. So if you look at these two, the first two are coming to God for pleasure, and next two are coming to God for knowledge. You see, there's a commonality. There's a particular pattern. The first two of non-believers, they are denying God for their pleasure. They want their pleasures to be fulfilled, and therefore they are denying God. And here, the first two in the believers, they are accepting God because they want pleasure in life. Similarly, the second two in the non-believers, they are denying God because they are seeking knowledge. And the next two, they are accepting God and they are seekers of knowledge. So it is not that if you are a seeker of knowledge, if you are an intellectual person, you have to be a non-believer. Or it is not that if you are looking for pleasure in life, you have to be a non-believer. You can be a believer also. So how Krishna splits this spectrum is by saying that Sukritino, only one who has spiritual intuition or spiritual credits can one become a believer. Because traditional reductionist science only can sees things in terms of 4 dimensions of 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time. But beyond space and time, there is consciousness. And to be able to go into this 5th dimension of consciousness, you need spiritual vision or spiritual intuition, which is attained only by spiritual practices, right? By spiritual credits. So therefore, Sukriti knows those who have got Sukriti or some spiritual credits or spiritual intuition, they can access the 5th dimension of consciousness. Whether they are looking for pleasure also, they will be able to see that, yes, there's a God who can give me pleasure and power and prosperity. And even if they're looking for knowledge, they will be able to see there is a higher power who can give me this knowledge. Whereas someone who doesn't have that Sukriti, they may be in pursuit of pleasure, and because of that, they will deny God. And there will be knowledge seekers who are intellectuals, but they will deny God, not because of any rational or reasoning, but because they don't have the spiritual credits or sufficient spiritual practices to be able to have the spiritual intuition to see in the 5th dimension of consciousness. So
that's a very interesting thing, that it's not that simple. How we look at things and how we categorize people, it's not that simple. There is something that is beyond what we see, that has to go in the factor of realizing God, realizing spirituality. There's also a very interesting word you used. You used the word intuition. It's a very interesting word. Would you like to share some light on this word, intuition?
Yes. Basically, we have these senses by which we gain knowledge of the physical world. So with these 5 senses, we gain knowledge of the physical world. But then that is knowledge of the outer world. So for knowledge of the outer world, we depend on the eyes made up of matter. Now, juxtapose that with when you want knowledge of the inner world, you need spiritual eyes, chakshu. So the spiritual subject matter cannot be grasped through eyes made up of matter. They need to be grasped through eyes which are spiritual in nature. And that's called intuition, spiritual intuition. And that spiritual vision comes only by engaging in some spiritual practices or by some spiritual credits, which may be, given to us, offered to us by some great souls. So that's how the word Sukriti represents that, do we have that bank balance of that spiritual intuition by which we can see into the 5th dimension of consciousness. So as far as the matters of the outside world are concerned, we can to some extent depend on the 5 senses that we have. But as far as matters of the inner world are concerned, we need a spiritual vision, which we are calling here as spiritual intuition.
So the highlight is there is a inner world, and we are vouching for it. Definitely, I was quite bothered of that word historian when it popped out on the whiteboard, but then it did not take a toll on me now that you have clarified it's not necessary. It's like that. So let's
Yes,
move on to the second
people can
question.
transform from one side, from the non-believer to believer, as in when they get the spiritual intuition. There was an atheist, the most notorious atheist of the 20th century. Do you know his name? Antony Flew. In the year 1950, he wrote a paper called Theology and Falsification. So that is one of the most famous research papers on atheism in the past century. And most of the atheistic mindsets and paradigms which are in vogue today are based on his research paper. But fast forward of 50 years, a few decades, and then he comes across more and more facts, more and more philosophical understanding, and then he comes up with a book called There Is a God. So the most notorious atheist of the 19th century or the 20th century becomes an atheist. He comes from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum. Similarly, there was one biologist, Nobel Prize winning biologist, who was the head of the Human Genome Project. So till 1973, he was a die-hard atheist. But then when on a trip to mountains, he got some spiritual experiences, internal, as I'm saying, the inner space, experiences of the inner space through some spiritual practice, and his heart transformed. And then he has written a book called The Language of God, which is DNA. He says, you can read the signature of God through the complexities of the human DNA. So that's how you can shift from one end of the spectrum to another end of the spectrum, not by pursuit of mundane knowledge, but as soon as you get that spiritual intuition of Sukriti, you can see and perceive the tattva of consciousness and God.
Whoa. So that is so that is a very interesting, and that's a very in-depth explanation of, and with of course appropriate examples where how people have gone from one extreme to other extreme. So I guess it's nature of the people plus the realization of the inner world. That's what we go for that's how we would like to settle this question. Which brings me to the next question, because we've got the next question in queue. So the next question essentially is based on one of the quotes of Karl Marx. You just spoke of Karl Marx in one of the previous explanations you were giving. The next question he is asking, he's posing a very good question, and that question is religion the opium of masses?
Religion, actually, this is what he said: religion is the opium of the masses. And so his entire theory was that just like people, why do they take drugs? Because they have so much sorrow and suffering, and rather than doing something about it, they just try to numb their suffering and sorrow by taking drugs, by taking opium. So therefore he says that there is so much suffering in this world, and all this religion is doing is, it is not giving any practical solution. All it is doing is to numb your experience of suffering by giving you promises of another world, and a non-existent other world, and just telling you that, okay, don't worry, you just suffer now at the hands of the oppressors, and in future you will go to that other world and be happy. So this is what he proposes as his theory. And so now, anyways, let's take it piece by piece. If you say religion is the opium of the masses, then probably Karl Marx served cyanide to the masses. Do you know why I say that? You can still see traces of that in the news today. Under the communist regimes, which were based on the philosophy of Karl Marx, do you know how many people were butchered and genocide was committed? How many people were killed based on this philosophy? Lot of 100 million.
Yeah.
As per even kind of very conservative estimates, it is 95 million people. Now the number like which means 9.5 crore people were killed in genocide in Russia and China, which were places where Karl Marx philosophy was applied in practice, where everyone would be given equal division of the resources of the state. But then this is what happens. Everyone gets equal exploitation. And compared to this, even in the 2 world wars put together, 3.5 crore people were killed. Now this one philosophy, which calls religion as the opium of masses, killed 9.5 crore people. So therefore, I call it is the cyanide for the masses.
Oh, is it a term you have coined? I'm excited to use this term publicly now.
Okay, anyhow, we won't hover on that for long. But let us go into the psychology and the background in which Karl Marx said this, to be able to better appreciate him. Yeah, so he was born in the mid 19th century in Germany, a time where a time where there was a lot of exploitation of the laborer class by the capitalists, and the capitalists use the church to keep these laborers under control, under check, saying that you just need to follow the command of the capitalists and God will be with you. So that with their money, they manipulated the church, and the church manipulated the laborers to just being slaves to these capitalists. So therefore, he's coming from a space of where he saw exploitation. And also, it was a time where opium trade had become very, very prominent. So he was seeing how people of victims of opium, and he was seeing victims of oppression, and he connected the two together, right? So there's a term in psychology, like there's a particular personality in psychology which is called a rebel personality. A rebel personality is someone who will rebel against authority for the sake of rebellion. One rebels not because of what the authority does, but because the authority exists. So this is a rebel. So a child who has such a rebel mindset, even if they have the best of parents, they will always find reasons to crib and rebel. So that's the rebel personality. So somewhere people who follow this Marxian ideas, they carry this rebel mindset where any authority has to be brought down. There, no authority can stand above. So his views were orchestrated by exploitation by the capitalists, and which was catalyzed by the dysfunctional religious order of the church at that time. And therefore, he proposed the theory that the state should control everything, all the transport, all the facilities. There should not be any public property, not be any private property. There should not be any inheritance. मतलब जैसे पिता से पुत्र को कोई प्रॉपर्टी नहीं मिलनी चाहिए, सारी प्रॉपर्टी स्टेट के पास रहनी चाहिए, right? And then there is no God, there is no church. So he created all of these. So which is basically like throwing out the baby with the bath water. कि बच्चे को नहलाया, देखा टब में गंदा पानी हो गया है, तो वो पानी को फेंका, साथ में बच्चे को भी फेंक दिया, right? Okay, there is some corruption with the religious order. There is some corruption in the capitalists. Does that mean that you throw away the capitalists? You throw away the religion. So that's why I say it is springing from that mindset of rebellion. And even if you apply his understanding that, okay, we need to replace this authority, just by changing power from one hand to another, you can't eliminate oppression without changing the heart. You can change power from one hand, give the power from one person to another. But intrinsically, if both these people are selfish, you take the power from the hand of the capitalist, who is a selfish person, and give the power in the hand of a communist, who is also a selfish person intrinsically. Then what happens? The communist does more exploitation because he has been given absolute power. The capitalist earns the power based on his intellect or resources. But the communist is ascribed absolute power, and therefore the communists have done more damage, which is visible in what we discuss. And another thing is, ultimate need of the soul is not wealth. Basically, Karl Marx was coming from a space where basically happiness is equivalent to the wealth and resources that you have. So if everyone has got equal resources and wealth, everyone can be happy. So the idea is noble. The intention is noble, isn't it? Yeah. The intention is noble that, अरे भाई पैसे से ही सबको खुशी मिलती है तो सबको इक्वल पैसे बांट दो. लेकिन इसमें ना बहुत बड़ा एक मतलब it's a very interesting and humorous thing that he didn't understand human psychology fully. Humans, even on the material plane, if you look at happiness on the material plane, one doesn't derive happiness based on what one has. One derives happiness based on what one has more than others. अगर सबके पास आईफोन है तो किसी को you don't feel special. But क्लास में 30 लोगों में से केवल 2 के पास आईफोन है और उसमें से मैं एक हूँ. Even on material mental plane, you derive happiness not based on what you have, but based on what you have more than others. Because that's the nature of material happiness. Spiritual happiness, on the other hand, is irrespective of your material position. Whether you are rich or poor, you have equal rights, you have equal facilities to approach God and to have spiritual happiness. And so therefore the ultimate need of the soul, ultimate need of all the human beings is not wealth. The ultimate need of human beings and souls is love. And love cannot be legislated. And love cannot be attained based on, from selfish human beings. Love can be received only from the supreme absolute lover, God. So that's where the Marxist philosophy, is kind of utopian and not practical. There was once a farmer. So a Marxist, communist leader went up and telling everyone that, look, in our country, everyone follows Marxism. He went to the farmer and told the farmer that, sir, agar aapke paas, if you have 4 cows and your neighbor doesn't have any cow, if I ask you to give 2 cows to your neighbor, will you give? He said, yes, general, I will give. I'll give 2 cows. Communism, everyone should have equal property, equal resources. Right? Kitna acha, matlab, inka, matlab, everyone is on the same page, right, Rishi? Okay?
Yes, definitely.
उसके बाद में उसको पूछा, okay, so Mr. Farmer, peasant, if you have 4 horses and if I ask you to give 2 horses to your neighbor who doesn't have any, will you give? Yes, communism, Marxism, I will give 2 horses to the neighbor. Okay. So then if you have 4 goats and I ask you to give 2 goats to your neighbor, will you give? No, I'll not give. Hey, you give cows, you give horses, why are you not ready to give goats? No, I'll not give. Why will you not give? Because I actually have goats. I don't have horses and cows. So he was ready to give the imaginary horses and cows, the imaginary philosophy that everyone will have equal resources. But when it comes to real life, no one is ready to, give even a penny to anyone else. So that philosophy is utopian only when people have. So the philosophy of equal division of resources is very is very superficial. Is untrue. The real philosophy is equal vision for resources, not equal division of resources, but equal vision of resources, and that's what Krishna speaks of in the 7th chapter. Sama loshtrashma kanchana. A spiritually evolved person has a different value system. A materialistic person has a value system of पैसा चाहिए पैसा, बाप बड़ा ना भैया सबसे बड़ा रुपया, मतलब कैसे भी करके पैसा चाहिए. Whereas a spiritually evolved person, sama loshtrashma kanchana, means he will look at sand, stone, and gold with equal vision. मात्रवत परदारेशु पर द्रव्येशु लोष्ट्रवत. अगर किसी और का पैसा है तो उसको वो देखेगा कि this is like sand. I'm not interested. So only when one is spiritually evolved, when one has spiritual intuition, can one rise above these sectarian ideas of this is mine and this is yours, and come to a platform where that Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that it is all property of God and we share this property of God. I'll not encroach on anyone else's property. I'll just take my share, and that's what Ishopanishad tells us. So if you really want communism that cannot be executed on the materialistic plane, it can be executed on the spiritual plane. So that's the dimension which Karl Marx probably missed. And if he's around today, if he comes to know, he'll be happy that his ideas can be truly executed, but with a little pinch of spiritual intuition.
That's a very refined understanding, Prabhuji. It's a very nice perspective. You did not completely demean the communist people. You said that their intention is good, but there is certainly, as we discussed in the previous questions, this world of intuition or this world of spiritual evolution, and a perception into the inner world that lacks. And the inner world doesn't have any limited resources. The inner world is everyone. So there is no need to divide, but there is a need to understand that it belongs to everyone. So it's a very fantastic, it's a very deep perspective, and I wish everyone could listen about this. We are going live, and now interestingly, minutes into the podcast, and for the first time, you have used the word God. For the first time in this podcast, you have used the word God, and you said Krishna, and you said how Krishna is enlightening us through Bhagavad Gita, talking about resources. So, Prabhuji, there are many conceptions of God. There is, somebody says God is one. Somebody says there are many gods. Somebody says that this universe itself is a big form of God. Somebody says that, right now, people have a lot of different conceptions about God, different gods, demigods. We have a lot of demigods. People believe in demigod worship. So, what is your take on this? Because Bhagavad Gita was spoken by Krishna, and in Bhagavad Gita, as we see that Krishna says that, he is the father, he's the seed-giving father of everybody. So what's your take on this? Why are there so many philosophies and conceptions of God, and how do we as spiritual practitioners or even as outside people deal with this conception of God? How do we come to understand God when there are so many philosophies?
Okay, so means कैसा रहता है ना, किसी भी कोर्स को एनरोल करने के लिए, जैसे हमारे when we were in IIT, so we had some elective courses, जो we could just choose. मतलब there was a choice amongst these 3 courses. You can choose any one. theory of the philosophy of education एक course था. Then there are some other like 3 courses like social science type के कुछ courses थे. So if the course from the curriculum itself appears so intimidating and difficult to us, तो वो कोर्स में जाता ही नहीं था व्यक्ति. बोलता है यार ये कोर्स में जाना ही नहीं है. इसका सिलेबस ही इतना टफ है तो इसके अंदर का सब्जेक्ट कितना टफ होगा. So similarly that happens with people when they approach this realm of spirituality and religion. By God, syllabus में ही इतना confusion है. कोई बोलता है there is no God, कोई बोलता है there is only one God and the truth, and that's all is false. कोई बोलता है there are many God, सबका साथ सबका विकास, सब एक है, सारे देवता एक है, सब भगवान है. और फिर कोई बोलता है कि नहीं प्रकृति भगवान है. कोई बोलता है अरे भैया I was an atheist till I realized that I am God. So like this there are so many different conceptions. So if I draw it for you, so let me, it's interesting. Okay, so it is number of gods is equal to 0, number of gods is equal to 1, number of gods is equal to many, and number of gods is equal to infinite. So इसके हिसाब से there are so many philosophies. Number of God is equal to 0, atheism, there is no God. There is one God, monotheism. Many gods, polytheism. Then someone says pantheism, this nature itself is God. Someone says I am God, autotheism, infinite gods. So all of this is so confusing कि the person says यार ये class तो मैं attend ही नहीं करने वाला. I am not going to venture into this entire subject of spirituality and religion. So we will try to make some sense of this entire spectrum and see how Gita actually synergizes all of these conceptions about the absolute truth. Because when we speak of absolute truth, means all other related truths are included in it. So we'll see how this entire thing will evolve. The Rig Veda says, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahudha Vadanti. There is one absolute truth only. But different learned people, looking at it from different perspectives, they give us different understandings. For example, an elephant, 4 blind men were walking and they came across an elephant. One man touched the tail, and the tail appeared to him like a rope, right? So he said, oh, it's a rope. Another blind man, he touched the tusks of the elephant. He said, no, it's not a rope. It's an arrow. It's a sharp weapon. Another man, touched the torso, the belly of the elephant, and he said, oh, what are you talking of? This is a ball, right? So based on the facet which they were approaching, they had different conceptions. But someone who has vision, he can see, okay, all of you are telling partial truth about the absolute whole. So yes, the rope is there, but at the end. The weapon is there, but in the front. The wall is there in the middle. And together everything makes the elephant. So, Ekam Sad Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. Now, the conception of God, if we talk of polytheism, that there are multiple gods, तो अगर हम उसको इस थोड़ा philosophical scrutiny से देखेंगे तो you can't have multiple supreme controllers, right? क्योंकि then how do we make a decision कि किसी को punish करना है या किसी को reward करना है, right? दोनों का difference of opinion. Then so from the absolute, that by definition God has to be the one supreme creator and controller of everything, right? If there are two, then who created whom, right? So therefore by definition there has to be one supreme absolute truth, and therefore polytheism by definition doesn't fit the conception of God. So there are different devata, like gods cannot be true. There has to be one supreme absolute God. Okay, so then chalo, monotheism, if you talk of monotheism, there are a couple of problems with monotheism, because people who talk of monotheism, like in the Abrahamic faiths, Abrahamic traditions, मतलब जानते हो ऋषि?
Yeah, surely. The traditions that arose after Abrahamic philosophy started, like Muslims, Christians, and different traditions.
Jews,
Jews.
Islamic faith, and the Christian faith. Now the problem with their conception of monotheism is that they say there is only one God who is true, and rest all are false gods. Rest all are false. So only our God is true, rest all gods are false. But that's not philosophical monotheism, that is political monotheism, right? Because philosophical monotheism says that the supreme absolute truth has to be one. Who can have different names? The same supreme absolute truth can be called by the name God, by the name Allah, by the name Ram, by different people. And it doesn't make difference to that the God. He can understand and hear our prayers in by whatever name we call him, right? So yes, they're philosophical. We are talking of philosophical monotheism, not political monotheism, where okay, I want to conquer this territory and put my flag over it. So that's political monotheism. That's not philosophical monotheism. Philosophical monotheism sees that all living entities are children of that same God, and whatever name you call him. Now, another problem with monotheism is that जैसा Karl Marx बोला कि the conception of God of these Abrahamic traditions is that he is he is a very strict disciplinarian God जो सबको punish करते हैं based on one's actions. So that was misused by the people who wanted to oppress, by the churches, by the capitalists. This kind of a conception of God was used for exploitation of the common masses. So therefore, the conception of God as a disciplinarian, the absolute one, philosophically correct hai, but then the conception that we have is he's a very disciplinarian person, a strict person. That conception creates lot of mercy factor निकाल देते हैं भगवान से, right? He is just a father. But then what do we have in the Gaudiya tradition? In the Vedic tradition, you have both forms, the feminine and the masculine form. You have Radha and Krishna, you have Sita and Ram, you have Lakshmi and Narayan. So that the father aspect, the disciplining aspect of God is offset by the merciful feminine energy of God, right? So therefore, so this conception of monotheism of the Abrahamic faiths is not the same as the principle of monotheism of the Vedic fold, right? And then now आप क्वेश्चन पूछेंगे नहीं हमारे सनातन धर्म में तो बहुत सारे गॉड्स हैं, बहुत सारे देवता हैं, वो अगर मैं केवल कृष्ण को ही कैसे मानूं, शिव जी नाराज हो जाएंगे, नहीं तो गणेश जी नाराज हो जाएंगे, वो भी भगवान है, उनका भी पूरा अधिकार है. तो भाई ये डेमोक्रेसी थोड़ी ना कि भाई वोट करके हम डिसाइड करें. We have to go by what the scriptures are telling us. So now an example is given about just like when you are doing in your college, when you are doing your post graduation, you are giving some teaching assistants. So, when you are doing PhD, तो आपको एक TA का role दिया जाता है. You are not the professor for the undergraduate students. You are giving a TA role, a research assistant or a teaching assistant role, where you take some preliminary classes for the undergraduate students, where you correct some of the intermediate tests for the students. But the ultimate semester examination is corrected by the professor only. The main lessons are taught by the professor only. So similarly, in the realm of preliminary lessons of Karma Kanda and Jnana Kanda, you can have different devatas. If you want, pleasures of this world in terms of Karma Kanda, you can go to Skandha, you can go to Ganesha, you can go to Parvati for fulfilling certain desires in the realm of Karma Kanda. In the realm of Jnana Kanda, you can approach Lord Shiva. But if you got to give the ultimate exam of Bhakti Yoga, you need to approach Krishna, the Supreme Lord. And so this is a very evolved understanding where the Devatas, they are universal administrators who are assisting the Supreme God, the Supreme Absolute Creator, cause of all causes, Govinda. And as far as many people have this confusion about Lord Shiva, so Lord Shiva is a very special case. He is not a Jivatma. Other Devatas, they are posts. You have Ganapati is a post. Different living entities occupy that post. Or you have Kartikeya is a post. Indra is a post. Chandra is a post. But as far as Lord Shiva is concerned, that's not a post. In order to do this material creation, Shiram Yatha Dadivakara Vishesha Yoga, Krishna transforms into this form of Shiva to take care of this material energy as Parvati. So therefore, this entire conception which Krishna gave in the 7th chapter of the Gita, if you read this, there are verses. Krishna says, Matta parantaram nanyat kinchid asti dhananjaya, 7.7, where he says that everything is resting upon me. Then Krishna says, Vasudevam sarvamiti, Sa Mahatma Dusulabha, that I am the supreme absolute truth. Right? So this points to the existence of a supreme God, creator. And then he says that this entire material energy, Bhinna Prakriti Ashtada, belongs to him. So the pantheists क्या बोलते हैं कि this universe is God, this nature is God. Krishna बोलते हैं नहीं, ये God नहीं है, ये godly energy है, God's energy है. So this entire material cosmos has divinity in it because it is God's energy. But if we misuse it, then it punishes us. But when we use it in service of Krishna, in service of God, then it elevates us. So and then Krishna says that those who approach, those who have material desires, they may approach other devatas, the teaching assistants, for lessons on Karma Kanda and Jnana Kanda. But Krishna says their results are also given by me only. In the verse 17.20 and 21, Krishna says, Prapadyante anya devata tam niyamam asthaya. I only give them faith to worship those devatas, and I only labate cha tata kama mayeva vitani dan. I only give them the results of their worship. So therefore, the philosophy of the Gita, it harmonizes everything. So does Gita include polytheism? Yes, there are different small God gods, but there's only one capital God God, and these small gods, they are lovers and servants of that supreme God, right? So and then is that God, the monotheistic God, is he very disciplinarian? No, he has the feminine aspect of love, care, compassion also, along with the aspect of Krishna, who is the supreme father, right? And so this is how it harmonizes everything.
So basically, this beautiful thing about synergy, the conception of synergy in all these philosophies. And ultimately, as you addressed, that Abrahamic religions, somewhere or the other, they somewhere perceive God as this disciplinary element. And that could also be related to the politics and the geographical conditions, the political conditions which existed back then there. So that's a very advanced, evolved understanding, creating synergy, along with also sharing the nature, as you said, love, care, compassion. So that's a very beautiful, synergized understanding of who Krishna is that you have bestowed upon us today. Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really an insightful session where you really went from the basics of how from sentimentalism to different kinds of people they approach God. The people, there is no problem with the nature of people, even if people are good. The problem is we don't have enough spiritual credits to see the inner world, to conceive that dimension of intuition, as you said rightly, the word intuition. And once that intuition is conceived, of course, there has to be this great wisdom of Gita that ultimately synergizes all this intuition. It guides us into this one path and also shares with us this very intimate nature of God, that is love, care, and compassion. So thank you so much, Prabhuji, for that intense understanding, such a deep understanding.
Yes,
Really.
I think it was little intense. So if we have scope for questions, clarifications,
Sure.
comments by the audience. Sure. If anyone wants, they can unmute themselves and ask any questions.
Yes, the floor is open.
Or you can post in the chat box also if you are comfortable. Are there any questions brewing up based on the tough discussion, या फिर वैसा हो गया कि सब्जेक्ट ही इतना था कि किसी को सब्जेक्ट लेना ही नहीं है?
There are certainly some glimpses of gratitude we can see in the chat box, Prabhuji.
Yeah, all of us have got spiritual credits to be able to have exposure and this inclination for spiritual knowledge. Definitely. Okay, since no questions are immediately coming up, you can definitely park your questions if you have any for the next session, or any comments or reflections also if you want to share, you can share now before we wind up for today. Okay, so then we will close the session for today. Thank you all very much for joining, and hope to see you next week with chapter number 8 of the Bhagavad Gita, which speaks about the destinations, the desires and the destinations. What kind of desires do we cultivate in life which will yield us to the right kind of destinations? Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajite ante kalevaram tam tam eviti kaunteya sadatat bhavita. Krishna says that the desires or the thoughts at the last moment of our life, the time of death, determine the destination that we go. So that's the destination for the next week, the chapter on destination, chapter 8. See you there. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Yeah.